Okay, so today I'm in Hampshire with racing journalist, is that right? Rolf
Yeah.
Johnson, racing journalist Rolf Johnson.
Still.
Still, so you've lived a life in racing, but not many people can say they've been balled out by Phil Bull, Ryan Price, David Ellsworth, and whacked over the head by Toby Bowden. What was the worst bollocking from that lot?
The worst. Oh, that's. I don't remember the bollockins because all I remember is the good time. I remember I drove Desert Orchid once back from the races. I did a few things for Elsie, and the travelling head lad said he drives like a maniac. That didn't go down well at all. One time with Toby, I remember I'd forgotten to send the horse's passport back to back to Weatherby's when it came from abroad, and I should have known, and I had to go up to Weatherby's at 6 o'clock in the morning to pick it up so that the horse could run. Fortunately, it won, so I was absolved there. And when I was with Ryan Price, everything was very not cloaked. That would be wrong to say that, but Marquis de Sade, it went wrong, and he was favourite for the Ledger, and it got out, and Ryan thought that I must have had something to do with it, whereas it was nothing to do with me. It was just unfortunate, shall we say.
And who shouted the loudest?
Oh, I'll tell you who did, but I think Cara Balding, probably Toby's wife, gave me the biggest bollocking that I ever had. Because she thought I'd got an eye on her daughters, which I hadn't, but she said she was going to cut an extremity off me if she found out that I had any dealings with them.
Now, you've risen to work with some of the top people in racing and were the scout at the Daily Express, one of the most prestigious, sort of tipping names. But your story started as a child bookies runner.
No, my father's runner.
Ah.
The bookies runner behind the barber shop in Barnsley. There was always a lot of young kids in short trousers like me because we weren't suspected of betting, but we were taking our dad's half-crown bets in newspaper and giving it to the bookies runner, who would then take the bets away, and if there was anything to collect, we'd go and collect it. So there was never any old codgers. It was all little kids who were taking the money.
Did you ever get collared?
No, because I think the police were probably paid off anyway. Though it was like that in those days.
So was that what piqued your interest in horse racing?
No, what really got me going was that I was drag kicking and screaming to Doncaster races, and I didn't want to go. I think I wanted to go train spotting or something silly like that. And the first race was won by a horse called Gold Hill, trained by old man Easterby, and it was owned by a Mr. R. Johnson. Well, that was it. I was hooked after that.
Now, you told me a bit of your past, because some of these are leading questions. What I want to know is the universities that you went to, Liverpool and Lancaster, they were quite handy for several racecourses. Were they hand-picked for that purpose, or was it just a bit of luck for a racing fan?
No, it was just a bit of luck, and there's two interesting stories. I was going into Liverpool one dark day when it was still a flat meeting, and it was pouring down with rain, and there was nobody else there, and I was quite slim then, and my hair slicked back, and the woman on the gate mistook me for Lester Piggott and ushered me through, and I was at Cartmel for the Gay Future coup, which is probably the most celebrated racing coup there's been, and it's the 50th anniversary this year. And I located Tony Collins, who is, I think, the surviving member of it. Lovely, lovely bloke. And he's given me some words on what actually happened. And it was near at hand to Lancaster, of course, so I always went to every Cartmel meeting.
So when you were there for that day, was it something that was sort of noticeable on the day? Was there a big hoo-ha? Or was it only afterwards, in retrospect, that you realised that you?
There was a hoo-ha on the day which I wasn't aware of, because the bookies sent somebody with money to knock the price down on the course, because they'd got wind that there was no blower in those days. They'd got wind of it, and therefore they were laying it at 10-1 in the betting shops, and they couldn't get rid of it. And they got thousands on it. They would have made real money, but the fellow with all the money to put on at the course couldn't get there, so it's returned 10-1. And of course, when the gang, I think they were called the Cork Mafia, went for their money, the bookies wouldn't pay them.
Yeah, I'm going to have to look up on that. It's one of those famous ones.
It's 50th anniversary this August.
So apart from honing your career as a gentleman of the turf, what were you studying at university?
The form book mainly. I did an interview at the university for University Challenge, and you had to say, as though you were on television, what your special subject was, and they said, "What are you reading?" And I said, "The form book," so they chucked me off straight away.
So what actual course were you doing there?
Politics and history, and then I started a PhD on Kipling, Rudyard Kipling, and horse racing in India. My thought was nobody would know what I was talking about, so I was bound to get it passed. But work life and actual racing interrupted that. And although I've got stacks of copy, I've never got it through the system. And my professor, who is still actually alive, goodness sake, is still waiting for it. But my connection was with India as well, because I've been out there several times and working, studying, and interested in their horse racing.
Yeah, no, in the background that you sent me, India features quite a lot.
Yeah.
I'm easy to confuse, but your career, the timeline of your career confused me a bit. So when you left university, is that when you went to Timeform?
Yes, that was when I left Liverpool and went to Timeform. But I was only there for a year and a bit, because there were three of us on the Racing Week. Howard Wright, distinguished racing writer, was the editor, and there was a secretary who was to become his wife, and me. And unfortunately, at the end of a year and a bit, Phil had to wind it up. It was a terrific magazine. I'm not saying that just because I wrote for it, but it was Howard's baby. There was an economic squeeze, and as a result, Phil thought he couldn't carry on producing it. And now the Timeform annuals are stopped, I suppose, for another economic squeeze, which I regret almost as much as I regret the Racing Week's demise. And I know I wouldn't be alone in that.
I've spoken to a few people that it's sort of a rite of passage for a certain generation, Timeform. I've never really got to the bottom of what they actually did. So you were working purely as a journalist. So what would have been your day at Timeform?
Well, you had to clock on. I mean, there was Phil, who was supposed to be a communist, and made us clock on. And senior members like Maurice Camacho, who became a racehorse trainer afterwards, and Brian Skirton, the national hunt-handicapper, they used to turn their cards upside down. But you would get in at 8 and you would go through the results. My job was really to write stuff for the Racing Week, but there were comment writers who would be bringing up to date the comments that were going to the Timeform race cards. Brian Skirton and Brian Clark would handicap. Morris would be at Brian's side. And this is a slight digression, but I think I'm right that in all Timeform's years, there only one season of the, and this is not to be critical at all, I wouldn't want it to be interpreted that way at all, because as I say, Timeform racehorses, which I've got every one, and the Racing Week, beloved, and it taught me the game. It was a fantastic grounding. The one season when Timeform finished ahead on all, and this was on all races, and if you can imagine anybody finishing ahead on all races, you know, nobody has to do that. It was when Brian Skirton and Maurice Camacho were running the jumps desk, and they were brilliant.
I remember seeing the adverts in the Sporting Life for the Timeform telephone service.
Yes.
And at that time, they were, you know, quite big. Was that sort of thing happening when you were there
No.
at the tipping?
No. That came after me. But remember, the Timeform tipping service, which I think did very well, they were only giving a horse or two, or perhaps not, almost a day.
Yeah.
I'm talking about having to give a tip in every single race that took place, and it was a fantastic feat.
I mean, I, and possibly the same as quite a few people watching this, the only time we've seen Phil Bull is in that famous documentary. So, what was he like?
He was, it's easy to call him an enigma, you know, but he hauled me in one day and he said, "That was a brilliant piece that you wrote last week in the Racing Week, Rolf," and I'm delighted. And 7 days later, for the next issue, he hauled me in and he gave me such rollicking about what a load of tripe. And that was Phil to a T. And he was beginning to get on by the time I was there. He was no longer in the first flush of youth, and he was gradually losing his powers. One derby, Clarkey, the chief handicapper, had got Charlottetown to win from Pretendre on his Timeform figures, and Phil had seen Grey Moss of Vincent O'Brien's win the D Stakes by 15 lengths. But you know, the D Stakes by 15 lengths in 4 runners, you can interpret it how you want. Anyway, Phil insisted on Grey Moss being the Timeform top rated for the Derby. And of course, what happened? Charlottetown won from Pretendre. And it was something that I took on board, that you can be the most brilliant man in anything, but especially in punting, while you've got all your faculties. And once you start to get older, your brain doesn't have the same elasticity, and you miss things, you don't grab things like you used to. And I think Phil was just beginning to go that way.
Obviously, well, I'm assuming he hadn't realised it himself, though.
Well, he wasn't, because he always had a girlfriend with him. I suppose he thought, well, if I can still pull birds, I can still pull winners out of the hat. I think it's easier pulling birds.